Give me a little sound check test.
Test.
Gotcha.
Test.
Yep. Just trying to make sure I levelize the audio. All right, we are live. Should take a few moments on for like the video feeds to pop up for everybody, but we are live. And stream health is extremely good, so that's a good thing.
Yep, it's showing up on YouTube right now.
Cool.
So we're good. Yep, we're we're on YouTube.
And that's why we pay for the good internet, right? Oh, okay. So before we get too in depth in the actual topics, I do have to tell you, y'all can't see it because of the weird angle of the camera that I have because I don't have it mounted up on top. But there's actually a neat little doodad back here next to my router. It's a multi-WAN switch. So basically, you can have two internets and use two internets.
Oh yeah, he was very excited about that.
Oh, dude, that was
when he got it.
That is I mean, I've had it for a while, but I didn't set it up till like last week. And the reason I even went out and set it up, so I don't know what you guys use for internet, and that's it is what it is. You use what you use. But I have my little Verizon router that I take on the road with me from time to time. And when I do that, when it's back here at the house, it's just sitting at the house, it's not getting any use at all. Makes no sense, right? So I wanted to find a way to use that. Well, what I came up with was, why don't I just hook this? Why can't you use two networks? Well, obviously it's not going to give you faster download speeds. It won't, like, let's say like go back to the days of DSL when you had like 24 megabit per second systems, where it's not going to take two 24 megabit per second links and make it 48 megabit per second internet for you. That won't work. But what it will do is take the faster bandwidth or the more prominent bandwidth and bounce back and forth between whatever network it needs to use to give you the optimal performance. I say all that and mention the Verizon router to say I have cable internet here. So just Donald, that's just the way it is around here. There's not a lot of fiber run to some of the older apartment complexes in Clemson. And so, our max upload, while I have download speeds of gigabit, our max upload's like 50 meg. You usually get between 40 and 50. I could speed test it and show you and you'd laugh. Well, Verizon has their 5G ultra wideband in the area. So for $25 a month on top of my normal plan, I get an additional between 50 and 85 megabit per second up over their network. And the ping is somewhat comparable to actual cable internet. Now the downloads on the best of days, it's about 500 megabit per second. I did see 600 the other day, but it's usually somewhere around 3 to 5. It still isn't bad, but so until that surpasses gigabit, I'll keep using it. But
On the topic of internet, before we get into it, I'm
Yeah.
gonna say cancel the LinkedIn stream because it keeps buffering. It was doing that like the past 2 or 3 builds for me. It just can't. It doesn't matter how good your internet is, how good your video card is.
So what we should do is put a note there. If we keep recording it though, it won't buffer when it actually does the actual video for people to look back at. Because I've gone back and watched our LinkedIn videos. The stream will record perfectly, but it still buffers throughout the.
I'll put a link.
Yeah, maybe
I'll put a link in chat.
YouTube. Yeah. And divert people over to the YouTube. While I'm thinking about it, because we've been conversing, has anyone done a sound check on YouTube to make sure we actually have sound? We should. If we don't, we've got bigger problems.
We should. Yeah.
Let's see.
Okay, yeah.
Good?
We're good.
Cool. Cool. So,
Oh.
this episode is brought to you by no one because no one pays us to plug ourselves.
Raid Shadow Legends.
Yeah, Raid Shadow Legends is not something any of us would ever play.
No.
You know, I speaking of that, I laugh at sponsors and stuff that I see on the internet. I find it hilarious when you start to see all these different people that sponsor different things, and I think my favorite one is like the CD key offers and those. I'm like, I mean, for somebody that's selling basically Windows keys, which is it's not a bad thing. Like, dude, they are selling. I don't know. Said somebody ever out there decides they want to sponsor us, I have a feeling we'll probably end up sponsored by doing a sponsored video for like Dell or Lenovo or somebody like that long before we ever do something for like a CD key offers.
Yeah.
I mean,
Surfshark or NordVPN.
oh God, every dude, like, I mean, oh yeah, that multi-WAN router also a VPN.
This is why well, yeah, you're right, because it does switch between two networks, so
Yep.
it can be considered a VPN.
It's also it is a VPN in and of itself too.
And that's, speaking of sponsorships and ads and whatnot, that's half the reason why I paid for YouTube Premium, and I'm not complaining about it because I went and actually looked at my premium benefits. You can actually see how many hours you've watched of ad-free videos. And I've been a member since June 24th of 21, so a little over a year now, and I'm at over 1,200 hours.
Oh, dude. Well, I mean, yeah, for all the times we go out on the road and do work or something, dude. Like that's that's a thing. Like, I mean,
I usually watch like 2-3 hours of YouTube a day.
yeah.
I mean, but I'll also have it like in the background and whatnot. Like I'll fall asleep with a video playing.
Yeah,
That's
that makes
actually
sense.
that's half the way I do fall asleep is I just have like a 30-minute video playing and it's just background noise.
That makes sense.
So having background noise without having Raid Shadow Legends get yelled at you.
Oh God, every so
It's
often,
pretty nice.
I can't stand that crap without a shadow of a doubt. So, yeah, we are sponsored by absolutely no one because that's how awesome we are. And the statement goes, we're just three guys with the dream of helping others better navigate the crazy world of workstations and fun work technologies. And boy, do we have a lot of them. Today is a very, very interesting. It's a sad day to think about it, to continue to think about what happened in the recent past, but it's also a happy day in that we got a lot to talk about. We are doing this early, though, Donald, we might do one next Friday if the two of us are just sitting around bored waiting on something. Because next Friday is officially the normal podcast day. But I mean, this one was Donald brought it up the other day and made a good point. This is too big of an opportunity. I'm Brad Medlin, though. You got lovely Chris sitting in the bottom of the screen. Then you got Donald sitting up top. The brief rundown of things that we'll kind of get through is if we're going to talk about the fact that EVGA is no longer going to produce GPUs for Nvidia. And I kind of want to go back and look at some of that history because I've owned EVGA GPUs, several of them. Matter of fact, you
got a Titan box right behind you.
I was getting ready to say they can't see it in the screen. There's literally a Titan X that's an EVGA.
I think they were the
Maxwell.
I think they were doing EVGA's. They were doing Nvidia's first stuff. Like
they
did
the R&D for Nvidia back in the day. Come to find out, I'm talking to a guy that I have out there that I talk to from time to time about things. Yeah, he was telling me, they did the actual R&D for Nvidia for most of their early series, GTX designs. I mean, heck, think about didn't EVGA have the GTX or the GT 880 and the 8800 GTX too?
That's predating me. I was alive, but I was not aware.
You weren't self-aware. You were aware. You were just not as aware. Oh, I remember those days. I remember all my friends would build computers, and I'd just show up with a goofy little laptop to play in our little LAN parties, and then I finally built my first machine, which I will say, this might shock a lot of people, but the first machine I ever built, Phenom 2 Black from AMD.
Yep. Mine wasn't a black, but I had a Phenom 2 945. Because we've talked about this before.
Yep.
I built mine back in 2009, 2010. I think it was 2010 when I built mine.
Yeah.
It was a good little computer.
They were sweet, dude. I mean, those old...
Considering the previous computer I had was an old Dell Dimension 2400. It was a little bit of an upgrade.
Yeah, we
from
had
like 2003, 2004.
That's about what I'm thinking. We had was like a Dell Dimension. I don't know what it was, but it had the what was that processor that it had? Had a Pentium 4 dual thread. It wasn't dual core. It was a dual thread machine.
Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh dude,
yeah,
that
it was
special. This is memory lane when you talk about this stuff.
I started with the 4770K. I built that.
OBS. And then we're gonna
Haswell. Haswell couldn't boost for anything. It's like 4.3.
I can't remember which ones I set up as which.
I never got a EVGA card before. One, because I couldn't really afford Nvidia cards versus AMD cards. Actually, no. Well, no. The second computer I built, I had a 970. Yeah. First one I had, I think, the first computer I had that I built, I think I had like a Sapphire.
Yeah.
Yep.
430 or something like that. It was a dog of a card.
Yep, Sapphire
but
used to build them.
But it's better than onboard graphics.
Oh, everything back in the day, everything was better than onboard graphics.
I could actually play Minecraft. It was wild. I remember. It was great. I remember because this was in like alpha days of Minecraft. I remember because I didn't have like a I was middle school. I didn't have like a credit card or anything, so I couldn't go online and order anything. So I berated one of my older brothers who did have a debit card. I was like, hey, can you please buy this for me? It's $5 right now, and then it's going to go up when it's in beta. It didn't go into beta for like 2 years after. But
I bought
early Minecraft, so many memories.
I bought Minecraft in alpha when and I had it, and then there was an update for snow.
Yes, I remember the snow update.
Snow was an update.
Yes, I remember the snow update.
I was running on like a $600 Core 2 Duo Vista, and I had to run it on Tiny to do anything. This is like a spinning hard drive, like 500 gig, $600 laptop in like 2010.
Oh, dude, tell me about that. And okay, just think, $600 in 2010. That was like a $1,200 to $1,300 laptop today. I mean, just the inflation of things. But to go, not to date us ourselves too terribly much.
Stop back in the good old day conversations.
Oh, these are hey, I could roll with these for days, and you know what? People would probably enjoy them when they go back and watch this later and be like, "Wow, it's a." You know how we go down the rabbit hole. Once we start on it, there's nothing we can stop it with. But the point that I've got, I have the article on screen now that talks about Igor's lab and things that went wrong with everything, and how being an add-in, because basically, if you followed and tracked and trended the profit margins that EVGA was getting, so go back to those early days like we were just talking about. I mean, because EVGA was pretty much responsible for a lot of the R&D for Nvidia, they were taking 50% cuts on what they were selling. So like they had a 50% markup on, or basically they were charging double what they were paying for the components. And they were saying now it's down to something like it was down to like 5%.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, yes, it was one of their highest revenue items, but it was definitely a low margin product to deal with, and so that's a.
And when you launch something for like way up here, and then you have to sell it 2 years later for way down here,
well, I'm not.
where's your profit?
I'm a capitalist person. I believe that all the way to the death. But you know, at the same time, when you screw consumers for 2 years and blame the pandemic and supply chains,
And
yeah, you're
mining.
not going to get and mining basically taking over all your stuff. EVGA is one of the few that didn't do that, but I mean, when the rest of the industry does, I'm not going to give you one stinking little bit of a handshake back. That's your own damn fault. Like you made your bed, you gotta sleep in it now. You can't basically expect to take basically double what they were MSRPing for, and you could say, well, that was secondary markets. Not really, man. I mean, you could go to Newegg and buy direct from Newegg, and they had 3090s that were going for $2,500 on Newegg when they were in stock. You know, this wasn't some, and yes, that's not the margin. You know, that's that 50% margin for 2 years. That's, you know, or for a year and a half, and then the mining bust causes you to be stuck with a lot of supply. That's your own fault. You should not. That's like, and to use a financial term that my dad used to always beat into my head, that's like taking and trying to live off of overtime. You know, expecting to get 75 hours of work every week for the rest of your life. That's not going to happen. Like, you can't budget yourself and budget your lifestyle on that overtime, or you'll go broke. And that's exactly what these manufacturers did. They budgeted on all this stuff, so they bought all this extra supply, thinking, "Oh, this is going to be never ending." When, I mean, people told them, "Hey, the merge is coming. Hey, you know," and then you're going to get a flood of used mining cards, and you should have known better. I mean, if you don't have financial people that can't forecast that stuff, you're in the wrong business. But one of the points to the actual rundown is, you know, who's going to fill the gap. And I was listening to a podcast from a place called Moore's Law is Dead the other day, and he and his brother go into a lot of detail on this kind of stuff. And I think the guy that runs that, his name's Tom as well, although he's not Tom's Hardware. He made an interesting point, and I think it's something you and I have actually talked about, Chris, and maybe you and I too, Donald. But I really, really, really do think the person that'll take most of that interest, it'll be PNY. I'm sure the Asuses of the world will take some, but I mean, you got to think about it. PNY sells and does the basically PNY is a large distribution company for Nvidia professional graphics. Speaking as someone who has gotten graphics cards directly from Nvidia, gotten them from Dell, gotten them from HP, gotten them from all the different vendors out there. A professional graphics card is made, manufactured, and shipped from Nvidia, and then they just have a distribution partner in North America for PNY. So basically, there's a stick, you know, for that 2%, whatever you want to call it, with the distribution costs really, and then 2% profit probably, they slap a sticker on it. And I think that's what you're going to start seeing. You're going to see more of these reference cards where basically they're just saying, you know, not reference cards, but Founders Edition type cards where you just see, because I mean, heck, that's what the Titans were. You're just going to see a stock design come out from Nvidia, and if you want to push it with some custom BIOSes or something like that, great. You'll see a few marked up overclocked versions, but I don't think that you're going to see a whole lot. And because of that, I mean, that's why I think like a PNY or somebody like that really will probably take up most of EVGA's gap there. Plus, I do love PNY's design. I love the blower cooler they used to put on everything. When they were making their own design, they basically would just like make a blacked out version of like the reference cards that had the blower, and call it what you want to call it. Yes, they can be loud, but I would take a blower design 3090 or whatever it is, something that just vents the heat something fierce and doesn't leave it in the case like all these other designs do. Because I mean, that's 90% of problems with anything these days is heat, and if you just blow that into the case and you don't have enough fans and you've got radiators in the way, and all you're going to do is make things hotter than hell.
Yep.
So I mean, that's just a way to look at it.
I've been pretty. We've sold like, oh dear, like 98% EVGA since we started, and we've been pretty happy with their designs. Even with the 3090, never really had any real heat problems. We think about it though. I'd like to see some of the EVGA engineers go to PNY.
I'd like to see that. I tell you, the other place I'd like to see them go is Asus.
Yes.
I will
Maybe
say
we can get a Strix that doesn't cost $5,000.
I'm trying to think if I've got one behind me, but I might not if I've got it behind me. I actually, my first graphics card I ever bought, the one that went with that Phenom 965 black, yeah, that was an Asus Nvidia GTX 295. Yes, it was a dual GPU card. That was the first card I ever bought. So that should tell you, it was. And I don't know why. That's back when NV switching and stuff like that was put on board of that thing to make it work fairly well, and it worked really well for a while. Matter of fact, I think the next card I bought after that 295 was I want to say it was a 580, an EVGA 586 gig. That's what it was, or 3 gig, 583 gig, whatever the extra RAM version was back then. So that's obviously dating myself a pretty good bit there too. But God, that was 2007, 2008 when I bought those stuff. But just continuing down the thought process. I mean, it's who's going to fill the gap. I mean, realistically, we don't know. There's so many other vendors out there, but I think the majority of it will be probably just more Founders Edition cards. I mean,
Hopefully not going through Best Buy.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. That's why I'm hoping PNY might get some of that, because maybe they'll just say, "Hey, we'll take the Founders Edition, slap a sticker on it, and sell it for you. Put it out there in all the channels the way you want it."
I'd love to be able to do more Founders Editions because it's a great card, but I need to be able to get somewhat secure
sourcing.
Yeah, and Best Buy.
It's dime a dozen, man. It really is. Although you can pretty much get them from anyone now, but I mean, obviously that's because supply chains are finally caught up. That was the other thing I was going to say. So let me pull up so going into the next one. So Nvidia did launch the 4000 series. They also launched the Ada RTX 6000, which I can't tell you how much I hate that name. Because you're going to get people are going to go out and actually end up buying a Turing based RTX 6000 when they're looking for the Ada 6000. I mean, that's if you haven't seen that and you didn't know that, I mean, that's going to be.
They should have just called it like the L6000. That would have been so much better.
LAD could have called it the AD 6000. I mean, they had so many other opportunities.
As I'm running the Turing RTX 6000 in my rig right now,
and you're looking at the guy running 2 RTX A6000s in NVLink, which makes me the most depressed about this next conversation. No NVLink on it, or none that I can see. And the conversation
on the what?
It's the same thing with the
actual Nvidia website. There's no NVLink slot there. Now that could just be that's a what do you call that design?
I think it's just covered up.
A graphical design. That could just be a graphical thing, because this is clearly a computer-generated image. It's not an actual version of the card. Yeah. But I've heard reports that the 86,000 or the Ada RTX 6000 will not have NVLink. I mean, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see when somebody gets me one to play with. And
I do know that Nvidia does have on there, like for their 4080s and the 4090 on their website, they do not have NVLink on those cards.
Yeah.
I'm gonna scroll through here.
Which makes sense. I mean, you
don't need
know,
it on a gaming card, guys.
it would be overkill. Not having it on a workstation card though can be limiting.
Well, and because they are on the data center cards, the Hopper cards, they're on Hopper. Obviously, they need to be, but they're not on the data center, or they're not on the design side of things. I mean, I don't understand why you wouldn't. And I got to thinking about this the other day. It would make sense if they were PCI Express 5.0 based and they had CXL, because then they could utilize CXL to just do NVLink over PCI Express. Save themselves 8 lanes and just run things back and forth over the 8 lanes of a PCI Express 5.0 based device. But not being set up that way, because realistically, guys, 4 lanes or 8 lanes of PCI Express 5.0 is more than enough to push these cards. I mean, hell, 8 lanes of PCI Express 4.0 is probably more than enough to push these cards. But I could see them using that, because that would actually be more bandwidth than, or very close to bandwidth of NVLink. If you look at the actual bidirectional NVLink claims.
It makes me wonder if the unreleased Ada cards are gonna have NVLink,
like
the L4000, the L5000, or if it's just gonna be like only the L8000 that we were. It's gotta be like a graphical error.
It's possible, but I'm preparing
An oversight.
I'm preparing myself. I actually reached out to some of the folks that I know at Nvidia and said, "Hey, can you tell me more? Just, give me an explanation for what's going on with it." And haven't got one yet. So I mean, it's all too new to them, anyways. They haven't quite gotten their own internal briefings, in the sales side of things, and those guys, and they're smart people like that, so they'll know something better than when we know something for sure. But yeah, I mean, if I find out, I'll let you know, Chris, and we'll that will be an entire podcast of it in and of itself, because we'll actually talk about that, and we'll talk about all the other things associated with it. So I mean, there's a good bit to talk about there, because I mean, somebody within the workflows that we utilize, I mean, NVLink actually benefits us substantially. Like it's a part of our daily workflow. I mean, in larger reality capture files and point clouds, I mean, it's a thing. You got to recognize that it's a thing. Not everywhere, not all the time, but it is definitely something that it's utilized. And if you're going to take that away from a lot of folks, and don't get me wrong, I mean, realistically, you're looking at probably I don't want to say 2x the uplift, but at least 1.5x the uplift of 2 A6000s in NVLink. But that doesn't negate the fact that 2 A6000s gives you 96 gig. I mean, it's like 94 that I can use. I can't use all 96 because obviously there's some penalties there, but I can access and utilize 94 gigs of VRAM and load up massive reality capture files with that. So there are people that will be upset if at least the 6,000. I mean, maybe the 5,000 doesn't come with it, but I mean, who knows? I mean, we can speculate on the 5,000 just by looking at the specs of the other dies.
Are we going to the Tom's Hardware article?
Yep, I'm pulling that up right now. I mean, it's just looking at the specs of the other dies. I mean, you're talking, and to those people that are out there that are going, what? There's an 80 class GPU on the 8104 die, guys. The 1080 Ti, the 1080 was on the 8104s. It was on the that was Pascal. That was on the Pascal the GP 104 die. Like most 80 class cards come on the 104 die. That's just facts. So I mean, that to me, you should not worry about that one little bit. The 4090 is obviously not the full die. I wouldn't be surprised if they launched a Titan class this time around. They've left enough performance on the table.
Yeah, there's about 2,000 cores left.
And a Titan class would be, with a Titan class machine with 48 gigs of VRAM would maybe be kind of at $2,500, like the last Titan V. I mean, that wouldn't be a bad little setup. That'd be a pretty good.
I thought that was $5,000.
No, Titan Volta was the Titan Volta, not the the Titan RTX. Sorry, the Turing-based Titan.
Yeah,
the Titan.
yeah, that was 2,500.
That was 2,500. The Titan Volta. They didn't have a Titan Volta.
The GV100.
GV100.
Quadro Volta.
Yeah, the Quadro version of that. That was a ridiculous price. But no, the Titan version was not. The Titan RTX actually was $2,500. And I mean, yeah, you're not talking a lot more performance, but that would be that prosumer kind of thing for somebody with 48 gigs of VRAM. I mean, that's what you're paying for is the extra VRAM. That wouldn't be a terrible decision for them. The 48,
maybe a 500-bit bus. That'd be.
You wouldn't get 500-bit.
No.
If you went to 48, you'd still be 384. To go to a 512-bit bus, you're really looking at 32 gigs of VRAM. But the power usage on that would be through the frickin' roof.
That would be the 900-watt card.
That would be that'd be way more than 600 watts. That'd be very easily 900 watts. Just because, I mean, you're already the power function. What makes these things so power efficient is a memory controller. Trying to run this super high, because I mean, look at the power consumption on the AD 6000. It's got 48 gigs of VRAM. It's utilizing GDDR6. I think 19 megabit per second or 19, whatever the 1900 megahertz gigabit per second, 19 gigabit per second VRAM. Yeah. I mean, at that speed, you're not going to see you don't need the fastest VRAM in the world to do what you want to do. But at that speed, I mean, that's 300 watts. Sure, it's probably not going to turbo near as fast as the 4090, but I mean, apples to apples here, boys. That ain't a big deal. That's not it's not something I would think would be terribly.
You're not buying a Quadro to go super fast.
Well, and you're also not buying a Quadro to just. I mean, granted, you can game on a Quadro, or you can game on an enterprise card. Can't call them Quadros anymore, Chris. As much as we want to.
Sorry.
Yeah, I
have it.
But yeah, it's just a crazy thing to think about. Like, I mean, it's not the same. It just isn't. And so we just looked at those. So I do have the PNY, which once again, it's got the same images as thing. The reason I have the PNY actual viewpoint up here is because I wanted to show you wanted you to be able to see this. This is actually where you see the 18176 and all that stuff. I mean, it is a very, very, very capable setup. This does not actually mention. This does support 3D Vision and 3D Vision Pro with the optical 3-pin mini DIN. It is compatible with QuadroSync 2. Hold up now. This image is old.
Why?
It doesn't have the 16-pin adapter on it.
Oh,
That actually
that's the Gen 5.
Yeah, that just looks like an A6000.
It is. That's all. That's all.
That's just an A6000.
Somebody just took an A6000 and copied and pasted it here, and then covered up and made it look different to a degree. So there could be NVLink support on this now.
You literally even on
Plus-
actually
plus-
let me looking at
plus that
Nvidia's
looks-
website right now.
That looks just like an A6000.
Oh, it does. I agree. And I'd be if I were a betting man, it's gonna look exactly the same. Like they're gonna use the same cooler design because that thing was. That's if you haven't seen an A6000 in person, guys, that thing is a slick design.
It looks it's the same photo.
Yep, and
It's the same photo. So
here's the funny thing to me though, it's showing that 8-pin
power adapter.
CPU power
EPS.
adapter, the EPS
Yeah.
CPU power adapter, not the 1 to 16 power or the 1 PCI CMS, the PCI Express 5.0 adapter. It's not showing that.
Mm.
So that there's hope. There is hope based on our discoveries of and discussions. I forgot about that them moving to that new standard again, which I mean makes sense. 142 RT cores. That should be interesting. I mean, the card will be the Ada RTX 6000 will be a massive improvement. We'd call a spade, but it will be a massive improvement. It's a unique cookie, that's for sure. Not gonna lie about that. It's gonna be a fun one to play around with and see how many. I mean, gosh, Moses, doesn't it have nothing but DisplayPort? Yep, it's got 4
Yeah, it's only-
DisplayPort 1.4 connectors.
Yeah, that's pretty typical for.
I'm
Did
still.
it?
I read a good article today from Tom's Hardware talking about it. I am not Tom's Hardware. Can't remember the site. I'll pull it up. But I am kind of disappointed they didn't go with DisplayPort 2.0.
I was about to talk about that. Yeah.
That would have been interesting. But I mean, just going back to the gaming cards, which I mean, once again, can you do work off a gaming card? Absolutely. I mean, sometimes I'd even recommend it. That they're much lower cost. They're going to have good performance, so on and so forth. You're going to lose some frame buffer. You're going to lose some of that stuff. So I mean, that's where your downfall is a little bit. But I mean, the nomenclature is what kills me. The 4080 16 gig. Like, why not just call it a 4080 Super? You didn't use the Super nomenclature with the 30 series, so why not just call this a 4080 Super, a 4080, and a 4090? So you leave your TI for later. But 4080 12 gig and 4080 16 gig? I mean, if they were the same exact chip, with the exception of the memory controller, I'd be like, okay, sure, yeah, that makes sense.
But it's
They're
not.
2 different dies. Like,
Essentially 2 different cards.
yeah, like
Yeah.
how are you? I mean, yes, they're saying it's 80 class performance. What did how many CUDA cores did the actual 4080 have?
16. The 16 has
No, just the regular 4080. Not
70
4080, the 3080. Sorry, how many CUDA cores did the 3080 have? The original 10 gig version. If one of y'all wants to look that up for a second, because I'm thinking about something here. Actually, let me just...
8900. No. What? Is this a split between 12 gig? Oh, they did it again for 12 gig and 10 gig. Okay, so the 10 gig is 8704. The 12 gig is 8960.
So
Yeah. 10 gigs
Can
87.
you, Nvidia? Stop
What?
messing.
But the thing that I was looking at though with that 3080 12 gig was, I mean, okay, keep in mind, recognize what they have to do when you are with a GPU like that, when you are creating a secondary class of card within inside of that card, you are actually having to alter the actual die's memory controller. So like when you disable parts of the core, like to go to the 10 bit to go to the 10 gig, you basically took a 102 die and disabled actual, memory bus.
Yeah. It's not just adding on more memory chips. Yeah.
But here's what so the 10 gig version though versus the 3080, the 4080,
12.
12 gig, it's actually less. The 12 gig has
Wasn't
less. The 12 gig has less CUDA cores than the 10 gig 3080,
It has 1,000 less CUDA cores.
and yet they're trying to say that this
Over
is
1,000.
2 to 3 times better than the
Less tensor cores.
You ain't gonna get me to believe it.
Wasn't the
The
3080
only
12
difference
gig?
only difference is they are banking on they're using the clock speed as the main difference.
They have to be.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the boost speeds right now. The 1080s or not 1080, the 3080s boost is 1710 megahertz,
Yeah.
while the 3080 is 2610. So
Yeah.
all of that performance is just coming from
Additional
the
clock speed.
from the clock speeds.
Because I mean, unless they do something crazy different, like ultimately,
So that just looks like, I mean, just across the
there's not a lot
board.
of IPC gain you get in these designs. I mean, from the last time you really saw IPC gain was Maxwell to Pascal. That was really the last time you saw big IPC gains from a. Now the RT cores, the tensor cores, that kind of stuff, they're getting a lot of IPC put into them, but the actual rasterization cores, the actual CUDA core, none of that. I mean, all that's through clock speed and node shrink. So
Nvidia's going heavy. Nvidia's going heavy on RT and AI.
Yeah. But I mean, which the thing is, that's the future of stuff, guys. I mean, when it comes to like 10 years from now, we're not going to talk about playing a game with rasterization performance.
It's also got a lot more L2 cache.
Oh,
a ton more L2 cache.
And Chris,
that
was something we talked about. That was exactly something we talked about. So,
like 10 times as much, almost.
That is why when we finally get down to Ryzen, the gaming performance. So there's a video by Linus showing Ryzen 7000 Alder Lake, the Vcache on Ryzen 5000 and Ryzen 5000, and we see that like the 5800 X3D was beating a 12900 in game. $500 R7 is beating or on par with a much more expensive i9. Yeah.
Which.
So cache is very important.
It is
to gaming,
and I believe Raptor Lake takes a cache improvement too.
Yeah. It'd have to.
I'm sure it does. I don't know for sure. I mean, obviously I have no clue because I haven't gotten a whole lot of. I don't usually pay attention to the Alder Lake to the desktop side of things. I'm more interested in the Sapphire Rapids and the Granite Rapids and that kind of stuff. Than in the lake side of things. But as you'll learn just from this conversation, these days, dude, it's changing. What you can do
about the lakes.
What you can do with these, I mean, obviously Intel's trying to go into this tile, chiplet, whatever you want to call it, based architecture with Sapphire Rapids, but just float the thought down the line. Float the thought. Let's play the game with me. Nobody really needs more than, if you're thinking in terms of even us, somebody that can utilize all the CPU cores in the world. If you had 4 8P core tiles, so
48P cores.
That'd be
32.
32. 4 times
Can't
8.
do that. Can't do that.
Hey,
Math is hard, man.
hey, I was told there would be no math. So if you just think this through, just for the conversation, you had four tiles that had 8 P cores, but then you got to rearrange and have all these different numbers of E cores behind them. And basically, you just took the generic CPU that was on and basically inter-die connected them as you would, and had so basically take the core portions out of that and put the I/O to a single die, and then you had these 4 core tiles like that had just, because apparently Raptor Lake comes with 16 E cores instead of 8. But imagine that with, that would be 64. Imagine that with 64 E cores and then 32 P cores. And all of a sudden now we're talking about a design where you're like, okie dokie. So, and the ability to let software determine, okay, if I can use all the cores, use them. If I can't use all the cores, I'll use the P. I'll just dedicate the P cores. But also being able to play the power level game better with that and be more power efficient. If 64 E cores will get it done for you just as well as the 32, because it's not like hyper IPC dependent or so on and so forth. Hey, let the E cores take off all this stuff and start to manage these ridiculous tasks that don't make sense to run on a P core, and save the performance cores. I mean, I still think this to this day. 32 cores from a single CPU, 32 performance cores from a single CPU is about all you should ever need. Just like realistically, because Intel's kind of played this betting game. I don't think you're going to see more than 8 P cores on a. You might see 12 one day, but I don't know why. I mean, from a single thread performance standpoint of view, 8 big cores is really more than enough for gaming. It's more than enough for dedicated graphics, all that stuff.
Consumer usage.
Well, I would even say like most mild content creation's good that way too. But imagine in, let's say 3 years. All right, if let's say 3 years, you've got 32 E cores, but they are the basically, whereas like right now the 8 E cores are about like a Skylake core. Imagine if they're hyper-threaded E cores in 3 years, and they're the performance of Alder Lake. No, we'll say 5 years. We'll go 5 years because that I mean, realistically, node shrink timeline wise, 5 years would make sense to me. So you've got, so you can put 16 or 32 Alder Lake hyper-threaded E cores with, P cores that are 10 times better than Alder Lake, with 10 times better P cores. Boys, that's blazing. I mean, that will run circles around Threadripper 5000. Like, granted, we're talking 5 years down the line, but that'll run circles around a Threadripper 5000 chip right now. If that were the case in 5 years. And then you've got those, like I said, you got the content creation folks that are out there, and they are. I mean, that's the way of the future. Is a big little design. Now, I'm sure Ryzen 9000, whatever they end up calling the next desktop chip, will have some kind of something to go along with that. That's highly probable. I would imagine. So
Yeah, I was talking to a guy several months back, and the 64 core Threadripper just was not nearly as common as the 32 core being bought or being sold by the big SIs, just because it didn't scale that well with really anything. But the 32 core was a lot more popular and cost less.
That makes sense. So I'm gonna bring something up now. Well, I'm jumping down to the Ryzen 7000 launch, and I'm gonna bring something up now. gonna butt hurt a lot of people out there in the world. So prepare yourselves, because they're not gonna believe me when I say this, but up to 5.7 gigahertz on the 7950X, unless you are physically going in and manually overclocking that CPU, you will never see the number 5.7 on your computer.
I saw an article saying that they would only hit that 5.7 if you held it under 50 degrees Celsius.
Yes.
Now, I can keep things under 75 on Alder Lake, but that's about the coldest that I can go. 50 degrees, that requires like a heavy custom loop.
A ton of cooling power.
And just so you're aware, so I'm going to reference this, and I'm bringing this up because we're going to get into a discussion about some of the HX chips here in a minute, from Intel, and the 55 watt Alder Lake chips they put in laptops, that I've got sitting, one of which I have sitting right next to me, and you will never ever see that number on your computer. I don't care. I think it is I think, and don't get me wrong, AMD is a wonderful manufacturer. I believe that 7600, that up to 5.3, you'll probably see that 60% of the time. Like, you might see 5.3 on that 7600X 60% of the time on like your actual, maybe not 5.3, maybe you'll see 5.1 on your task manager. But you'll never see, unless you are manually overclocking that thing and pushing a core to stay at 5.7, you'll never see that number ever show up. Even in like hardware monitor, or what's the other one? Hardware Info 64.
Yeah.
Like, so you'll never see it there.
Awesome tool.
Neither one of those will ever show up, because one, you'll never keep, like you said, you'll never keep the thing cool enough unless you have a freaking air conditioner sitting right next to the dang radiator to keep the radiator at sub 20 degrees Celsius. You know, you'll never see it. And
maybe the 7900X.
the 5.2 on the 7900 or 5.6 on the 5, I don't believe that one either. I mean, not at 170 watt TDP on 12 cores and 24 threads. Nope. So I'll give you my rundown with the reason I say that based on the HX chips. So the i9 12950HK, all right, and I'm going to compare this to a 65 watt i7 12700. Okay. So similar architectures. One's a 65 watt CPU. One's a 55 watt CPU, right? The 55 watt has a max turbo, single core turbo of 5 gigahertz. I have seen that all of a grand total of goose egg number of times since I got this machine 2 weeks ago. You know what I have seen? 4.5, 4.6 on single core, 4.6. I got one day where I was real lucky and saw 4.7. I mean, and this thing's screaming. But you should, like, unless you have this thing set up in where you're parking all of your all of your cores, and you have, from a performance standpoint, the enthusiasts in us, you'll never see that number. Now, as a workstation user, you might see it occasionally, but it would, like I said, it would only be because. But I'm going to back up and say that that's going to be very rare, because the machines and the companies that have to design from a corporate standpoint of view for those folks, those types of machines, they're not going to put the they're not going to put the thermals in there to be able to make it hit 5.7.
That, and I don't want to put a heavy duty loop in there with all those points of failure in something that has to go for days.
5, 10, 20 years, whatever.
Yeah, no.
Now,
all in one, yes. Air cooler, heck yeah.
That
loop.
being said,
It sounds similar to, advertising, or the world's like the world's highest, like, overclocking or whatever, where they have to use like liquid nitrogen or whatever to cool it down. You know, trying to actually get 50 degrees Celsius is, you know, absurd when you're
We
actually
got-
trying to when you're putting 5.7 gigahertz,
The
you know,
the 28 core Cascade Lake part, the Xeon W3195X or that whatever it was.
Uh-huh.
You'd never see that one either without running a chiller on it. But they claimed it because they figured a way to do it.
We had one build, industrial strength awesome V2, that was an 8086K. So what? 6-core
6 core 12.
and yeah, with 4 XE480s and a custom one-off case. And Ida had the thing at like 42 degrees, which I realize it's exceptionally. But we had 4 XE480s. You can't fit that in any OEM case. Not even like a 1000D.
can't fit that in a rack.
You can't fit
No.
that in a damn that you couldn't fit that in a single Lenovo, HP, Dell machine.
You could fit it in Super Tower, but that's it.
Yeah, full tower.
And, well, no, you can fit it in. No, you can't put four
Not even
480s in a full tower. You might get two.
In yours.
Well, I'm saying you might
Just a
get
full
two.
tower, like the ATX full tower
Mm-hmm.
designation.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Super Tower is a totally different monitor, guys. That's call that what you want. Call a spade when you see that. You're not getting that in a normal build.
50 degrees is not happening.
No, not consistent.
83, sure.
Now, backtrack this on the statement here. Is it a powerful CPU that will be absolutely?
Yes.
I mean, I'm already impressed with some of the things that I've seen from it.
As we see if we go down.
As we continue to go down, it's a rig to look at. It's a design to look at. I'm actually very interested in possibly seeing how well this compares to a we call them a compares to like a 12900K or something like that.
You're gonna have me 2 test beds.
Yep, but I'm interested to see how this would like compare to like an Alden like i9 from like a CAD perspective.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to have me 2 test beds.
Highly single core, single thread performance stuff.
Yeah. Dang it.
I mean, it's definitely a major uplift. Definitely a major uplift. I am curious though in their choice of DDR4 4 DDR4 16 gig DIMMs versus 2 DDR5 32 gig DIMMs. That doesn't give me much of a like for like comparison here. I know why they did it from the i9 perspective, because the i9 does not like 4 DIMMs. It drops the memory speed off.
Oh.
Although it really doesn't, guys. That's a marketing ploy. You see the bandwidth is still there. It's just the speed is lower. But think of it like a highway. When you have more highway lanes to go through, things things move just as fast. Even if you're on a 2-lane highway moving 55 miles per hour and you get one slow cookie, you're screwed. But if you're on a 4-lane highway and one slow cookie gets to 55, you just go around them. That's the point of extra RAM DIMMs. Even if you do lower the speeds a little bit. Like I said, I'm also kind of confused as to why they went with a Gigabyte motherboard over an Asus motherboard. I keep consistently.
Cost.
I don't care. You have an Asus motherboard for your i9 platform. Why are you not running an Asus motherboard for your Ryzen platform? Consistency is key, in my opinion, in a lot of these things. If you're not going to be consistent, then okay, we talk about it. But
yeah,
I'm going to sit there and say that. I mean, so okay, Photoshop.
That's for test anyway.
Into the testing pictures. Photoshop here. That's some
One core.
That's a pretty bar chart there that shows you yeah, one core is still king. And in a lot of those situations, that's going to be the system. And realistically, guys, if you buy a Core i9 12900K, guess what? You can go into the extreme tuning utility and get the performance of the 12900KS from time to time when you need it. So, I mean, we're talking that point spread, that ain't that big a deal. I mean, also we're talking within what? 10%? Less than 10% there? 5%, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
All right.
It's pretty darn close.
Lightroom. Hey, guess what? We're working with a 16 core part or with a 32 thread part versus a 24 thread part. And the 24 thread part is almost margin of error from the 32 thread part. I'm not going to sit there and say that. I mean, keep in mind, Raptor Lake gets a performance bump and moves to 32 threads. So
I'm curious about Raptor Lake.
Oh, I'm so curious because if the rumors of it hitting 5.7 itself are anywhere to be believed, which keep in mind Intel's old mantra, 14 nanometer made the 8 series, the 7 and 8 series, and how much of a clock speed bump did we get over 5 generations? Pretty damn hefty.
I think, I don't know if AMD can hit 5.7. I think Intel can.
I think
We'll
it's
see.
believable. But I mean, once again, chip's going to run hotter than crap to begin with. But apparently nobody cares if you saw the was it Gamers Nexus review where they had 98 degrees is the new normal.
Yeah.
Or something. Did you see that one, Donald?
I did not.
He did a review of it and he's like, yeah, high temps is the new norm. And I mean, that's fine, but why is it the new norm? Because they went from having 125 watt TDP with what was the boost, power boost, like 175 to now having like a 250 watt boost with their new platform.
Yeah.
And I got news for you. If they had made the smart decision years ago, okay, I know everyone gets mad at Intel for this. So I'm going to speak for Intel in a positive light on this. I think it is smart to every 2 to 3 generations change your chipset, change your socket. Why? Power delivery needs change over over node shrinks.
Mm-hmm.
And so if power delivery changes, then and the amount of power you can deliver to something changes, you ought to be looking at ways to optimize. I mean, I would bet money that Zen 4 could have been up near these speeds for 2 or 3 generations, or not Zen 4, Zen 3 and Zen 2 could have been up near these clock speeds and had better clock speed management had they had better power delivery, more pins to deliver it over, for lack of a better word. But the longer you go with a lower pin count or a lower LGA count, however you want to look at it, the less power delivery you have for the CPU for those expressed issues. So, I mean, just moving down the logical point here. So this is Lightroom Classic, and this is, I guess, didn't want to pull the picture up. I wanted to see the next one. I guess this is just with Lightroom passive scores, active scores.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I'm not sure what the difference is there, Chris. Can you shed light on it?
So like active is when you're actively going and cutting and editing and whatnot, and passive is when you're previewing and when you're scrolling through a PDF and it's trying to buffer on its own. That's passive. Like when you're generating a preview versus cutting and manually working on it.
Okay. All right. This makes my heart hurt for AMD.
And Premiere was a bad.
All right, they win the 40. They're the 4K red export. But I mean, because that's the 4K red export. You don't have it opened up on yours to look at it at the same time.
This is when QuickSync takes over.
Yep. And I will say it though. I mean, okay, it's a 4K red export. From the content creators of the world, how many of you are using a 4K export? Are doing a 4K red export? Unless you're a big shop that's probably running Threadripper Pro or Ice Lake something, you know, or waiting for Sapphire or still running a Cascade Lake system. And unless you're one of those shops, I mean, you're not doing 4K red. You might be doing 1440p red, but I tend to shade to the other side of that thing. So After Effects. Okay. So this is
it's a strange. After Effects is a strange beast because they recently, well, not too recently, it's been a couple months now, but they re-enabled the multi-frame render, so now you can use all your cores in After Effects, which up until they took it off in like 2015, you could only use one core, and then they put it back on. Now you can use all your cores, but at a point you start running out of RAM real fast, and that's when you go to Threadripper Pro, where you have more RAM, lower actual speed, but then you don't run out of RAM. So After Effects is strange.
But I would look at it in this light because, I mean, preparing for what's coming. That makes just preparing for what's coming. I would say at minimum you're going to see over the KS probably a 15 to 20% bump from the 13900K. A 15% bump. I mean, let's say it's the because I'm thinking clock speed here too, guys. Let's say it's on the low side of 10% bump. I mean, that's another 1,300 points or 130 points on top of that, which puts it at roughly 1,500, which is better than the 7950X. I'm out here talking out my butthole, but I mean, you can see that DaVinci Resolve. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I would expect that they would take this, but that once again, that's because it's got more threads. None of these are single core bound,
Except Photoshop.
Except for Photoshop.
And Lightroom
to a degree.
Yeah.
None of these are really single core bound. So I mean, you're looking at an apples to apples comparison that's not really apples to apples, right? V-Ray, of course. I mean, it's what everybody wants to see on that one. Yeah. Once again, all right.
More threads.
I would think that would make sense. More threads, more better. I mean, that's just call it what you want to call it. What I really don't like is I really don't like them putting this 5950X in blue. They should have had that in a different color. Because that almost seems misleading. But we knew that it was going to beat that because it didn't have the same number of cores and threads. Once again, Cinebench, and this is where I just laugh. Really, guys? I mean, more cores, more better. More threads, more better. Plain and simple. But oh, by the way, you still don't beat either of them in single thread. Which, I mean, that's okay. That's a point to discuss for a second. We talk about CAD applications from time to time. Think about CAD applications here. Most CAD applications are not multi-core enhanced for the 85 to 90% of the workload.
Yeah.
So if they're not multi-core enhanced for 85 to 90% of the workload, more threads is not more better. What I don't understand is this too, and y'all can. I want your opinions on this. So I'm gonna say this. So think about it this way: the i9 12900KS, it's the most cores, most threads, and it has the highest single core boost clock. All right.
Too damn hot.
The 7950X has the most cores, the most threads, and the highest single core boost clock. Wouldn't it make sense from a chip design perspective to say, okay, let's come down the stack a little bit. Let's look at let's make a 12600 KS that boosts to 5.3 gigahertz or 5.5 gigahertz.
Yeah, that would, like, the
All of a
only
sudden,
reason.
you have the king of graphical design softwares, right?
Yeah. So the only reason, well, a lot of the reason why we sell predominantly i9s is because of the single core. And I would sell a lot of i5s if it had the same single core. Because it would put out less heat, it'd be easier to cool,
You could overclock
cost
them,
less.
but
Yeah.
the problem is you have to deal with what's it take to do the overclock. But I would ask this to you, Donald, because I mean you have a 12700K. Have you ever tried to? Do you have the Intel XTU on your computer?
Intel XTU, what is that?
Extreme Tuning Utility.
Yes, yes, I do.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
My Asus board has that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
No, I'm talking about like it runs in Windows. You need it. You need it.
If you didn't,
It's an.
if you didn't,
I think I do.
Download it from Intel if you don't have it, and get it set up to work. And I want you, because all I do.
What is it again?
The Intel XTU, Extreme Tuning Utility.
Gotcha.
I use it on the HX chips.
I have. This is from AM or not AMD. From Asus, the CPU ID ROG like CPU Z.
That might.
I do have.
That might have
something
the ability
comparable.
to do some overclocking, but like the Extreme Tuning Utility, quite literally. That's to me that is a very simple way to go in and do some mild overclocking to like to an i7 and test it out in Windows. I mean, we're talking like, okay, you can go and boost the
Well, I got to restart my computer if I want to try and use it right now.
well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But play with it, play around with it some this weekend or something coming up, and let me know what you think of it, because it'll also require you to disable a couple of little things that don't really matter anyways. But yeah, it's actually pretty unique. You can change like the max time, the max power, like you basically say, okay, look, if you don't want to boost the actual clock speeds manually, you can just say, okay, you, instead of being 200 watts max power, use 250.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which is, to me, I think is a smart way to be a smart, simple way to say, okay, I can get some power out of that. But my point is this: I mean, if you had an i5 and a single core setup, you know, the Adobe Photoshop, that's making me sick. Yeah, quick sync is nice. I mean, AMD, like I said, there's a lot of upsides to this thing, but I'm still sitting here going, but really, I'm mathing it. I'm trying to play math here, and I can't math that Raptor Lake's not going to be better. In every scenario. Now, I could just be straight up wrong, and this thing could come out and be a waste of silicon like some of those old bulldozer CPUs were, and Rocket Lake was. But
I really don't think that Raptor Lake is gonna pull a Rocket Lake.
I mean, I don't either, but I'm trying to be
Cautiously
honest here. trying to be
Yeah.
honest for the fans, so they know. I mean, there's a possibility something out there could happen. We don't know. It could also struggle from massive availability issues because it takes forever to get it out there. But I mean, I don't think that's going to be an issue either.
Hopefully
this is
Pat
like I said-
doesn't. If they hopefully Pat doesn't pull a goose egg.
I will say this, and this is one of the things I'm hoping too from a I didn't read that. Let me go up to the top of the page real quick because what I wanted to read was what was it done on Windows 11 or Windows 10? Windows 11 Pro. There we go. Okay, and the reason I was wondering that is to me like that's a thing that need to be thought about. I'll get down here to the Blender stuff.
Blender is basically the same thing as Cinema 4D and V-Ray.
And I would expect it so, though. I mean, and once again, more threads, more better. I mean,
And so the fun thing about V-Ray and Blender is most people don't care about the processor mode
no.
because it's all on GPU.
Now, this is one that I like to bring up because I think this is important. Because this is an area I think the Unreal Engine benchmark.
Yes.
I think that's a very big point to bring up for folks because even I've noticed that in the past. I don't know what the folks at Epic Games have done with the Unreal Engine, but they have really done well at optimizing it for AMD CPUs. Very well at doing that.
It kicks butt. Ooh.
I was getting ready to say,
Threadripper.
Threadripper crushes that thing. I mean, compiling all that. That there's an Intel CPU on the market that can compete with it.
Nope.
And that speaks volumes. Now, keep in mind, what are 90% of your games consoles on? AMD. So, I mean, they've been developing for this for years, guys. Like they should have had that kind of stuff taken into effect. But that being said, I mean, what I'm more impressed with is the amount of increase you're seeing on the 12 core over the old 5950X here. I mean, I dare say that 16 core might be competitive with the 24 or 32 core Threadripper 5000.
Don't go anywhere. Let me pull up the tests for Threadripper 5000. See, this is Unreal.
Yep, the Unreal bench.
So, give me a sec. Professional. We have view Unreal Engine articles with CPU. Pro 5000 real. All right. So the 24 core, the 5965 did 520 in source code compile.
All right, what's the CPU score at Unreal on the 32 core?
Source code compile 5975 WX is 448.
That's got to be. That doesn't make any sense. Do they have like a comprehensive for it?
I'm gonna put this in the chat in Teams. You can put this in podcast.
Oh, here we go. Crap. I pulled the wrong one. I pulled up the individual stuff for it. Not that. So the compile shaders. Which ones do you have? Code compile.
Code compile.
All right. What was the code compile on 32 core?
448.
Okay, so it's not as fast as the 32 core. It's something. It's like close to 700.
So the 5975 does 448 in code compile. The 5965, the 24 core, does 520 in code compile.
Yep. So they are both still just absolutely destroying the 7950X. and co-compile. Just making it aware they're still destroying it. I mean, see, that's where I was hoping that this would be like a win for them, is so that you could get some of these things off. But here's the thing with
But
Threadripper that kills
it's
me.
it's also 8-channel memory.
Yep, that's exactly where I was getting ready to go with it. You're not 2-channel versus 8-channel. I mean, it's gonna be faster. It ought to be. Let me actually pull that up from the chat because I want to see that real fast.
And 64 core is 318 for the 5995. That is a third of the 5950X score. It is 2/3 faster.
Okay, so this is what I wanted. The overall CPU score is 1732 for the 64 core. Yep, here we go. The 32 core is 1390 overall. The overall for the 7950X is, well, it's giving me all these things in like a funny method that like it's this much faster. It is 931. So what's let me go see what's 931. So it is just a shade under the 24 core. But yet still faster than the 32 core Xeon W3365.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've got a side comment about Unreal and Ice Lake, how much Intel sucks.
Oh God, you don't have to have a
it's
side comment. That's apparently Unreal.
It's just embarrassing.
Well, you're not gonna. You keep in mind, core clocks aren't the same. You're not looking at it's not a like for like comparison. Like it is. It will be generations before Intel can keep up with AMD and Unreal.
So the 3365, I buy it for the $3,500, and it requires ECC. The 5965 does not require ECC,
It
and
doesn't
it's
require
like
ECC.
$1,000 less.
You can put stock RAM in a 3365 and be fine. You can do that.
I always forget that. But it's $1,000 less, and it's what, 10%?
Oh yeah,
10+% faster.
Mm-hmm.
And you can water cool it with an all-in-one safely.
Simply. And you can overclock it a little bit safely, simply.
Intel that needs to get Sapphire Rapids out.
Which I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Sapphire Rapids isn't going to solve that problem either. It will be Unreal, once again. Go back to what the software was developed on.
Originally,
and what it was developed on for.
Yeah.
CAD packages, they were most all developed on Intel back in the day, and while yes, x86 is a multi-generational platform for a lot of different people, guys, if it was developed on Intel, it's going to run better on Intel, even if Intel is slower. That same thought should be given for Unreal and actual development software for games. Now, games are also going to run on Intel processors because they want them to. But let's go back and think about it that way. I mean, there's opportunities all over the place for that kind of stuff to exist. I mean, it's not a huge point to bring up there. I do want to jump into 2 other topics real quickly, and I'm going to kind of compile them down so that we can spare it out, because this is actually going to be a discussion point between me and you, more so, Donald, because the differences that you've seen with Alder Lake versus some of the older machines that we've worked with in the past. If you had, I'm going to use this as my example. If you had an Alder Lake CPU that could put 512 gigs of RAM on it, I feel like you would go with even the lower core counts. I feel like you would go with that machine because overall it would just be faster. I mean, just think about workflows as a whole. Everything you do as a whole. If it had that that ability, I feel like that's the way it would go. I don't know if you have a different thought process or point to say there.
I mean, more memory never hurts. The only thing that I'm limited by, at least with with my board when I built my machine, was the just total like memory that you could fit on a DIMM for DDR5 when it was first released. The most they had was 16 gigs, so I have 64 gigs right now. But as that memory is going to be, as dies can shrink and the heat cooling gets better on it, heat management gets better on there, and you can fit more to eventually get that 64 gig per DIMM and whatnot. Once with like having I think with how my workflow is, I feel like there would not be much of a there would be a performance boost, of course, from having like an i9, the 12900 versus the 12700. But really right now, my limiting factor is how much RAM I have. So if I could have 512 gigs of RAM, I don't really, I wouldn't see the benefit of having an i9 personally, like with our workflow.
Well, I think about it more from the obviously with what perspective of what we're doing to a degree, but I like to explain this because I like to think about it from a go back to those processing machines that we have, the 7920 and so on and so forth, the top and the stop.
Mm-hmm.
The design purpose of those is to be heavy multi-threaded workload, which is necessary from time to time, and then also with that heavy multi-threaded workload, it's also designed to be a heavy RAM intensive workload, and so that makes sense there. Now, to a degree, I think that it goes back to the referencing back into the rundown. I haven't mentioned there for the HX laptops. Like if you have a highly single core workload, realistically, I'd look at the i7. I would, from an HX laptop perspective. Like if you're working with CAD or something like that, you don't need the i9. It's not going to buy you that much extra performance in this situation. It really isn't. But the conversation that we were having earlier about what is it, what is that turbo boost? Is that 5.7 gigahertz? You're not going to see that because there isn't a laptop in the world that can keep this thing thermally under control. And the power delivery alone to it is going to be a limiting factor there as well from a laptop perspective. So I roll this back into this conversation, which is the turbo boosts for Xeon processors, Ice Lake, Sapphire Rapids, those kind of things that you're going to see here in the upcoming future, because Xeon's going to be the same way. Those max turbo numbers, those max single core turbo numbers, I really feel like it's false advertising sometimes. Because I don't feel like you sit there and can see it peg at. I'll give you an Ice Lake example. Max turbos 3.5 gigahertz. I don't think you sit there and see it pegged at 3.3 constantly either, because it gets hot and it's got to cool off. Referencing back to like the tops perspective. I mean, you don't see those max turbo numbers, and it doesn't sit there. It might spike and hit it every now and then and be helpful for you, but it's not going to sit there when you're running an actual workload on it. Gaming is the example I love to go to. When you're playing a video game, I mean, you're gonna hit your thermal throttle and you're gonna fall back right down real quick because that core is not gonna be able to sustain that boost for that long. So I think that's something different. I mean, I have it on here to talk about the P360 Ultra some, and I will say this. I'll bring some of this up real quick, and because Donald, you've actually seen the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Intel needs to go to Lenovo and discuss this. This is what a NUC should be. 110%. This is what their and I'm not talking about like their performance NUC. I'm talking about their normal NUC. These are the kind of options that you should be wanting to see in one. I mean, they're about the size of a NUC. If you haven't seen a P360 Ultra, go take a look at it. Look it up. It's made by Lenovo. It's a freaking steal of a machine. It's got the options for an A2000 or a A5000 mobile, so an A4000 for lack of a better word. And it performs every bit like it. Donald's having kitty time over there.
Yeah, he jumped on my lap. So what does he get? I get to hold him like a baby. Cat! Hey, it's cat time.
I have no cat. I just have dog.
You have dog.
I could call dog, but she's a little bit bigger.
Oh, he's not happy right now.
You put him down.
He
Why?
is not happy. I did put him down.
But that's what he's saying. He's like, well, "You put me down. Why did you do that?"
Oh no, he's not happy that I held him up to the camera.
I see. We'll have a more. We need to. I'll save this one for later because we are running quite long for the episode for now. But I will bring this one up. The desktop NUCs. Intel really needs to look at these designs that Lenovo has taken and say, wow, because and the mention of the boost clocks. I see every single one of those. And this thing's only got a 300 watt power supply, guys. It's a laptop power supply. It's actually, I'll give you this. It's literally the same power supply they use on their big boy laptop Thunderbolt dock. That's the same power supply that this thing runs on. It's 300 watt power supply. And it is, every one of those cores will hit 4.8 gigahertz. Every one of those P cores will hit 4.8 gigahertz without even trying, which is the max turbo it lists. It sits about 4.6 or so, 4.4 to 4.6 on average. But to give you the example, just on thermal perspective, I did the Inventor. Autodesk Inventor has an NVMark benchmark that I run just to kind of see a comparison, and the i7 beat the i9. Not handily, but mildly. Now, I am having some back and forth discussions with manufacturers about how to potentially get some more performance out of that i9. But yeah, it's that little sucker. It does a good job, and it maintains those clock speeds, and it does everything that you'd want it to do. And it's got a good GPU in it that gives you 4 display outs. Plus, it's got the iGPU in that thing. Technically, I mean, you can't have like display wall settings where you got 8 displays, but you can do, and it's set up like a display wall, but you could do. I didn't realize Hello's right behind me. Yeah. Speaking of animal,
Fur balls.
I was gonna call her. She's just laying right here. But speaking of that, performance setup, you could actually run 7 display outs of this thing at one time. Like I said, they're not going to be a linked visualization, but you could have 7 or 8 different panels with different Chrome tabs running, and it'd work. 8 different individual displays. I don't know what in the ham sandwich you would need 8 different displays for, but it'd work.
Flight simulator.
I was doing a request that ended up not working out, but we had minimum 10 screens.
I mean, I still don't know what you would display with that. I mean,
one camera per screen for security.
Okay, I can see that. I mean, realistically, in that situation, you're probably looking at just like something that's got like 3 T1000s.
Yeah, we were using the A4000s.
I mean,
didn't work out.
Oh yeah,
It didn't.
Well, I mean,
no, they never got back to me, and I never got the contact at the actual customer.
And they probably sourced it differently, and call a spade a spade.
I'm tiny.
Yeah, they went with something something different, some other way of doing it, which I'll still say, if all you need is a single display out, these little stick computers.
Boy.
Yep, that's an HDMI port.
Little Raspberry Pi almost.
Houston, that's got an Intel Core in it.
Yeah, that's the.
It's got a Core M3.
Yeah.
M3 or M5? M5.
I was about to say that was an M5.
Yep,
Core
M5.
M.
I thought maybe I couldn't read, but
nope, M5. I mean, it's got. I mean, it wasn't an Atom core. Put it to you that way. It was
gosh, Atom cores.
Which that's what E-cores are, guys. E-cores are Atom cores. They're just the Skylake generation version of an E-core.
I remember. Oh God, Atom. I remember.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah, it is. No, my something my brothers did. My older brothers, they teamed up and they bought my father a little tiny. It was like a little 11-inch. Yeah, a little 11-inch like netbook that had an Intel Atom in there, and it was the most useless paperweight I have ever seen. It could barely load his emails. Like that's how like awful inefficient it was.
Yeah.
That was and that was and that's even like I reinstalled Windows on it. Like so it didn't have any of the bloatware.
Manufacturer bloat, yeah.
Yeah. I think it was an HP
Which
netbook too.
I might point out, have you guys noticed this? That new installs of Windows auto install Spotify.
I literally had a pop-up the other day saying log into Spotify, and I'm like, I never installed this product.
Like,
what?
Why? Yeah, it's a part of Windows now. Windows is pushing I guess they're pushing Spotify because they don't want to push Apple Music or YouTube Premium.
I very quickly uninstalled it.
Yeah, same here.
I did not appreciate that pop-up at all.
Now, okay, you mentioned YouTube Premium, so I have to go back and reference this because this will really date me. I have owned iPhones for a while now. I like Apple products; they are what they are. But I still hold true to my Google roots. All right, I had my first cell phone because iPhones weren't available with Verizon Wireless when I had a cell phone plan after Blackberries. Keep in mind, I was around when Blackberries were actually a thing, and dude, if you didn't have BlackBerry Messenger, you were not a part of the crowd at all. Not even the in crowd, the crowd. You were just on the side of the road. But Android, when the first droids that I had and whatnot, I bought into the Google ecosystem. I loved Gmail, I loved the G apps and all that stuff. One of the things that I did buy into was Google Play Music. So when they launched their subscription service, not too long after Spotify and Pandora started their kind of stuff, they were like, hey, we want to get on this game. We've got all this library we can work with. I said, okay, well, hey, yeah, I'll do it. So my YouTube Premium account, I have had, I really ought to go look at how many hours I've not watched ads like you just said, because mine's been active since 2007. Or wait, it launched way after that. It launched like 2010. It's at least 2010. as soon as I could get it, I got it. And let me tell you, I'm an OG when it comes to the G apps and whatnot. I am a true OG. It's been a fun discussion. Everybody remember the Raptor Lake reveal is tomorrow officially. They're going to talk about it. I've also heard there might be some discussion about art cards. You know, maybe some pricing for some of the higher end models.
I saw a picture of Pat getting an A770, I think.
Hey, I mean, we might get one to test. I gotta see if I can align the specs to make it work for us. But I actually got asked about possibly doing that. So, and I mean, I'm the kind of person where I always say you want to be hardware agnostic. Like, if you're a game developer, I mean, back to the Threadripper and AMD stuff. If you're a game developer and content creator, if you're not using this Ryzen 7000 series, you need to jump on the board there. That's like, I mean, if you're trying to do a budget Threadripper type machine, this is the way to go. I mean, you're going to get near, what's the 24 core 5965WX cost, Chris?
2300-ish.
1900-ish? 2300-ish. Okay. So
yeah,
call tax and installation of all that $2,500.
Sure.
For $600, you're basically getting the same performance. $700, sorry. Very close to the same performance from a Puget benchmark setup. Yes, you're losing memory channels, but I mean, if you're a at-home goof-around developer and you want to have something that's Threadripper Pro-ish but don't want to spend Threadripper Pro-ish money, and I would guarantee, like you said, water cool it, overclock it, dude, you're going to have a sick machine.
And with the potential of there being a 64 gig stick DDR5 and having 256 gigs
A potential. We know they're coming
on a consumer platform.
So here's
with a 4090. Yeah.
You didn't hear this from me, but I mean I heard this from somewhere else, so I can say I'll repeat it. But I had heard from another person out there talking about it that Raptor Lake they waited because they were waiting on 64 gig DIMMs. That's why it hadn't been put out there yet. So you might actually see the launch of some launches of 64 gig DIMMs tomorrow.
That would be
exactly. And like I said, this was a YouTube guy that was out there that was talking about it, and he was saying, the reality behind it was that it might be because they want to appease to the content creator, and so if they've got a way to get, let me go back to that real quick, just from my perspective to look at it. So if the 8+8 comes close to 1,000 or the 8+16 on the i9 comes close to 1,000 on the Puget bench for Unreal Engine. Once again, basically but it's got 64 gig DIMM support from the launch, right? They can sit there and start to come back and say that, hey, once again, no, they're not. We know this. They are not competing with Threadripper. That ain't gonna happen.
It does, however, take the market that Cascade Lake served.
Oh yes, this is the reason I've waited. This will be the machine that will replace the Doctor.
Yeah, and
I will go ahead and say
non-pro.
Before the end of this year, I will likely have a new personal desktop that will. The only thing I'm going to hate is that I'm going to lose some PCI Express support, but
you'll be fine.
If you saw the number of PCI Express cards and stuff that I have in my actual build, now two of those I can just immediately do away with because one of them is what's that thing called? One of them's a 10 gig NIC, so I'll be able to get that with Raptor Lake without a problem.
Yes.
And the other is a dual GPU, which if I move to Ada,
80.
I won't have. There's no reason for dual GPU. I'll just be stuck with 4 monitors, which still makes me sad. But realistically, I end up hooking other things up to the other monitors to begin with, so it's not like that's a huge deal.
And you could still put like 11 billion M2s on it.
Say that again.
You could still put 11 billion M2s on it, like on board, and then add in card.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
very glad. I'm very glad you still said 11 billion because I was going to call you out if you didn't.
Hey, I was gonna call it as 11.2 billion. Thank you very much.
11.2. That's inflation.
Yep, that's right. True fitty. True fitty. Just make sure everything's true fitty. Yeah. So I mean, as long as I've got
Rent's
that.
too high.
Well, and the thing is that the one thing that I've got to figure out is the M.2 to U.2 stuff, because I do use U.2 ports, and that's the one thing that it seems like Raptor Lake doesn't have support for unless you get a W board.
Is the ProArt?
The W680 ProArt didn't have them that I can remember. But I mean, I could always go get like a Supermicro or a Gigabyte board that has U.2 support on it.
Yeah.
The W680, W780, whatever chipset it'll be, that'll be just fine. That wouldn't surprise me if they opened up and had a little bit more PCI Express lanes on Raptor Lake too. So instead of 16 PCI Express 5.0 lanes, or 16, not 16, 16 plus 4 on the CPU, we might actually end up with Raptor Lake and having like I don't know, 16 plus 12 on CPU, which 28 lanes. I mean that. No. Be 30. 16 plus 12 be 20. Yeah, 28 lanes. Be 28 lanes. So 28 lanes on a CPU. That's not massive, but I mean, once again, it's 16 PCI Express 5.0 lanes, which you can bifurcate down to 4.0 lanes, which means you could realistically get 2 16-lane graphics card setups. I mean, there's opportunities, but once again, nobody's going to be putting a dual GPU machine together anytime soon. But yes, it is 8:54. We have been doing this for, we've been doing this for well over 2 hours. It is time to catch some Z's and catch everybody on the flippity flop. Yeah, maybe we'll figure out a way to do some more discussions next weekend. Maybe even Chris, maybe if you and I are feeling bristly, maybe tomorrow night we can do I don't know how your week's looking, but maybe we can do a little post Raptor Lake discussion tomorrow for a few, maybe in the late afternoon.
Possible.
Just after the thing
Possible.
goes off.
Yeah, possible.
Find some free time this week. I'm trying to catch up on my free time that I need to get to utilize since I've been overworking myself. Yep.
We have 5 minutes left in our meeting.
Well, 5 minutes left means deuces, y'all. It's been fun. We look forward to talking to everybody soon. And leave a like, comment, tell us what you like, what you didn't like, anything you want to hear about in the future. We'll appreciate it.